this video, I'm going to show you how to bind a pillow, but make it look like it's a faux cording. So if you just wanted to bind a pillow regularly, what you would do is you'd take right sides together, or wrong sides together, make sure your zipper is open somewhat in the back, put your right sides together. You would want to sew with, pin it all together. And remember, pillows are puffed out, so if it doesn't kind of match up in one place, just go ahead and match it with a pin and pin that 1/8 of an inch, because as the pillow is expanded, none of that will matter. Alright, so you would go ahead and just bind it like you regularly do. And regular binding, I'm just going to show you this pillow, it's for spring. You can see that, while I've got the binding, it kind of looks puffy, kind of has a cool look to it. I got this idea from Beth when she said, after binding this pillow, after binding a pillow, I will never do cording again. And it got me to thinking, well, why can't we add some batting to the binding and make it look like cording? So I did that on this pillow. I don't know if you can see how it has this thickness to it. It's much thicker. It looks like a cording that goes all the way around, and even the corners, I know you're going to want to see those corners, even the corners are mitered. It's pretty much the same thing. So what you want to do first is, to do this, is you want to go ahead and pin your two pieces together. So this would be my wrong sides together, the front of my pillow, the back of my pillow, and you want to make sure that that zipper is unzipped a little bit, at least so you can get your hand in there and unzip it the rest of the way. You also want to make sure that if you have a flap, that you kind of sew the flap down a little bit so that it doesn't flip up, particularly on this side with the zipper head. Alright, so I'm going to pin that down real quick, and then I'm going to stitch just a scant quarter all the way around the pillow just to hold the pieces together. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stitch one side and then go around the corner so you can see that. So if you look, you can see that this is where my wall to my 1/4 inch is, the very side there. And whoops, sorry. And I am sewing right here. I'm using this inside part for my edge. Okay, I'm getting ready to come to around the edge. I do have my needle in down position. Now this red line is your 1/4 inch line, and you can see that I'm right here on the edge. All 1/4 inch feet have that, so I'm going to do one more stitch past that, and then I'm going to turn my fabric, and it should be pretty good. Yep. Kind of scooched a little bit. There we go. And again, this is just like a scant 1/4 inch, just to make sure that, or an 1/8 of an inch really, just to make sure that the pieces stay together when I put my binding on. Okay, I'm getting to this flap. I want to make sure it's going down, it doesn't flip up. And I put a pin there because that piece kind of flipped back. And I think I'm going to do just like a little back space and get my scissors. Okay, alright, so I cut my binding 2.5 inches by the width of fabric. I sewed it together with a mitered seam. So you can see my little mitered seam right here. There are 2 strips that are sewn together. And then I took a 2-inch strip of batting. It wasn't long enough, so I have it right here. You can see I just kind of butted them up next to each other. I did use a 505 spray adhesive. I just, you know, I didn't spray a whole lot. I just used it to kind of, you know, in spaces just to kind of keep it in place. And then I went to the ironing board and I pressed this really good. And I'm probably going to press it again just to make sure that all the fluff is out so it will be easier when I turn the corners. Yeah, so when I went up to edit the video, I realized that I didn't film it, or I must not have hit the record button. So I ripped off a lot of my binding to show you this again. So when I start about right down on the seam where the green tree is. I pinned the binding to, and that's where I started. I pinned it to the pillow, and that's where I started. I left about a 7-inch tail. And then I went around and around, and I do want to show you, I've got a little bit left that I ripped off, and I'm going to show you, this will show you how I go around 2 corners, which is probably the part you want to see anyway. And then I want to show you how I finish it. Now the finishing was a little bit different, so hang till the end of the video so you can see how I finished it. Okay, as I get to the end, all 1/4-inch feet have markings on them. The Faux has a red line. There's a line right there. From that red line to the needle is exactly 1/4 of an inch. There's also a mark on the back side behind the needle, and from that line to the needle is a 1/4 inch. So what I want to do is I want to stitch so that I'm going to put a little needle down here because my vision is skewed with the camera and everything. When that red line gets to where that pin is, which is right along the edge of my fabric, I'm going to stop. Now I'm going to hit the backward button. And then I'm going to hit my scissors. Now what I did there was I left a 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabric. So now I'm going to turn my project. I'm going to flip my binding up, and then I'm going to flip it back down. So I've created this little, like a little 45-degree triangle. Okay. Now I have found it is easier, instead of starting by all that bulk, needles don't like to start going over a bunch of bulk. If you just come in a little bit and start, and then go forward just a bit, the feed dogs can grip that fabric, they're happy, they can feed it through, and then you just hit the backwards button to go back and get what you missed at the beginning, and then go forward again. That also gives you like this little back and forth lock stitch too, which is really helpful on those corners. Okay, now I'm just going to go down to the next edge and we'll do that one more time. I'm going to do that pin thing again because, again, I have a tripod in my lap. Alright, here we go. Alright, hit the backward button, do a couple stitches, hit your scissors, turn the project, I call it turn the corner, but turn the project, go up, creates this nice 45-degree angle, come back down, it'll create this little like prairie dog triangular thing. Put it back under, go forward a little bit so you're not right there at the very edge. Stitch a few stitches, go backwards to get the part that you missed, go forward again, and make sure this is my last side, so I want to make sure I leave a nice big opening. So I'm going to go a few more stitches, and then I'm going to do a tie off. Okay, now let's talk about how we finish these two pieces with a mitered seam. Okay, I've got a nice big opening in between here from where I started and from where I ended. That's what you want. I would say this is probably, hold on, let me get my little ruler. I would say that's about 10 inches opening. Next, you want to take a straight pin. Make sure it's straight and not bent, because if it's bent, it can mess things up. And put the pin somewhere, you know, kind of eyeball halfway between the two. So that's 5, 6. I think I'm going to move it up just a tad, because I'd rather have the bottom have more room than the top. Okay, we're pretty even there. Okay, so next step, we're going to take the bottom portion and we're going to kind of pull it up. Now, because, let me just backtrack, this binding is 2.5 inches wide. So half of 2.5 inches would be 1 1/4. If this were 3-inch binding, it would be 1 1/2. If it were 1 inch, it would be if it were 2 inches, it would be 1 inch. But mine is 2.5, so my mark will be 2 1/4. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to lay it 1 1/4 inches past the seam line, and I'm going to mark it. And this is why I love these rulers. I want to make sure you can really see that. Let me see if I can get my camera in there for you. I'm going to take it off the hot tripod. It's going to be shaky. You see how I have a 1 inch and a 1/4 inch. Okay? Now I'm going to do the same, and there's my line. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull this one, pull it kind of tight. And I'm going to take that 1 1/2 inch mark, so it's 1 inch and a half, 1 1/4, I'm sorry, 1 1/4 past the pin. So here's the pin, I have a 1/4 and I have a full inch. I'll take that camera out and show you again. Can you see that? 1 inch and a 1/4. Okay, now comes the scary part. We're going to cut. Alright, now I'm going to cut on that blue mark. Oh, no, just joking. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to join these two strips together. Alright, like that. But we don't want all this batting, because that would be batting here, batting there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to come down about 2.5 inches, make a little mark, and I'm going to cut away that piece of batting. And that's the nice thing about the temporary spray adhesive. What are you doing, dog? You know, it's semi-permanent. Okay, now the easiest way to do this is to take and decrease the space that you have. So I usually fold it up, just fold it up to get some of this space so we don't have so much space between these two tail ends. Okay, the one on the top, you're going to open it up and lay it out so it's right sides up. The bottom one, you're going to open up just like you open up and read a book. You're going to open that up and you're going to lay it on top of the piece. So let me do that again for you. The top one, open it up like a book. It's wrong sides together, flip it over and lay it down. Bottom one, open it like a book, lay it on top. All right. Now, take the tail, the upper right side corner, and just go ahead and fold it downwards, kind of crease that. And usually I do this by the ironing board because the iron really creases it. Really crease that down. Good crease mark. If you like, a lot of people like to take that crease mark and they like to actually draw on it, you know, so they can see it when they get to the sewing machine. Sometimes it's hard to see. Okay. All right. Open it up like a book. Lay it right sides together. And then you're going to take 3 pins and pin it in place. First pin is going to go right up here, keeping the corner intact. Second pin is going to keep the other portion intact. And then third one is going to be right down there by the edge. Okay? Now we're going to take that back, and if you want to test that, if you're doubting yourself, you can always put a couple pins on the line, take that pin off, and you can just test it. You know, just kind of do a dry run and make sure that it all makes a nice loop. Okay? If you did anything wrong, you will not be able to, like, run a car over that. You know, it'd be all twisted and contorted. Okay, so what did I do here? Back. Okay. I'm going to add that pin back in that I took away. Now I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to sew from one point to the other point. Okay, so I'm going to go from one point to the other. I drew a really heavy blue line so you guys can see. Here we go. Okay, let's take the pins out and then cut the triangle off about 1/4 inch from that seam, from the seam. Oh, it's nice I have lines, you know, nice straight. Isn't that nice? Okay, now I want to remove the pin that folded the pillow up. Voila, it should all go nice and neat. Now I'm going to go back to my machine and finish up with my 1/4 inch. Okay, that's how you get a nice, perfectly mitered seam. Now nobody knows where you nobody knows where you started and where you stopped. All right, now let me show you how you hand stitch this to the back. Okay, before I start binding, I always press out the binding to the outer edge. That just kind of helps it, makes it a little bit easier for when I'm folding it around. So First thing I'm going to do, get this up here so you can see what I'm doing, is I'm going to put some Wonder Clips down and hold everything in place. Usually do one side at a time. You can already see, well, maybe you can't see, but I'm definitely feeling how thick this is right now. I'm like, holy moly, it is thick. Even though I've pressed it so many times, it's still thick. Alright, so I pretty much go down one side. Okay, then I get my trusty little tool that I cannot live without. I think this is why I like binding, because threading a needle is so easy to use. I like to use these Milners. This is a size 9. They're long, skinny needles with an itty bitty little eye. And what you do is there's 2 holes, or there are 2 slots. This one here has a razor blade. This one is where you put the needle in. And then thread. I'm just like, let me get some thread out of my machine. I'm going to pull off a piece of thread. I'm going to use the razor blade to cut it. Then I'm going to go down to the other end because thread has direction, I'm told. And I'm going to wrap it around through here, bring it over, kind of hold them together, press the button, and voila, my needle has thread in it. Okay, now this is my quilter's knot. I take the end, I put the thread behind the needle, hold it down, I wrap it around 1, 2, 3 times, pull it down a little bit so I can grab my thumb nail, and then I have my fingers inside the loop of the thread, and I'm going to pull my needle up, oops, and through, and I got this nice little knot. Okay, trim off the tail, and if I didn't know how to do that, I would absolutely hate doing anything by hand, but because I know how to do those 2 things, I'm okay with it. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is right here in the corner, I am going to take the needle and come in through the back side. I just want to kind of catch it. That kind of hides my knot. And then I'm going to do 1 extra stitch there. Okay, then I'm going to, and it's very important to keep your finger behind when you're working, so my finger is usually right behind because you don't want the thread to show up on the other side, because then you'll see all these little dots and thread dots, and oddly enough that's what they look for when they're judging binding. They're going around looking, that's one of the things they look for, to see if there are any little stitches on the front. Okay, then I'm going to kind of weave the needle in between, you know, right underneath the backing, and bring it out into the fold of the binding and make a stitch. So my needle never goes to the other side, just kind of slides under this red fabric, just the 1 layer. And when the clips get in my way, I just scoot them down. I actually find binding to be very relaxing. I like to do it. Oops, see, I can feel it, my needle going through to the other side. Don't want that. And once you get going, you know, once you get started, it's a lot easier. So slide the needle back, bring it up to the front. See if I can get real close for you guys. I think I can get rid of this clip now. It's in my way. So you might wonder what to do when we get to the flap. I'm just doing the same thing. I took a little bit deeper stitch at the beginning, but I'm just catching that first layer of fabric after that. Okay, I'm at the corner. Now I've got one of these binding clips right here at the very corner. And oh, we got a little bumpy there. What I want to do is fold it so that I have a mitered edge. And I may have to just really hold this down. It's not gonna look quite as pretty until you start stitching, okay? Because it's kind of hard for these clips to really get that in. It's kind of bulky. Let me see if I can get that a little bit better. There we go. Just kind of have to play with it a bit. One there, one there. I'm really clamping that thing down. All right, so there you see it. It is clamped. Okay. So, first thing I'm going to do is, as I come up here, I want to make sure I get a stitch right there in the corner and just really kind of pull that. And I might do one more. I actually might turn that into a knot. Just loop that. It needs to go. Okay. Alright, so I've kind of pulled that tight. Now I'm going to move that clip, and you can see I have this little line. I'm going to actually sew that down. So I'm going to go to the edge first with my needle, and then I'm just going to come walk it back down. These are little stitches, okay? Little stitches. And then one more. So I was able to actually get 3 in there. And now that's all nice and mitered right there in the corner. Alright, then I'm just going to continue binding down the next side, or hand stitching. Just remember to keep your finger behind, you know, so that if you're not going to poke your finger, okay? You'll just it's a feeling thing. You'll be able to feel it when it's you're going through to the other side. Although if you're pretty strong, you may prick your finger. Okay, you see how puffy that looks? Just looks like I've got. It looks like I've got faux cording on my pillow. Maybe not in the back because it's a little bit thick, but look how cool that is. And it's so much easier than cording. So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.